Jack Mercer arrived at Silver Harbor Resort at 12:50 p.m., the time glowing faintly on his phone as he slipped it back into his pocket. The ocean was just beyond the glass facade, blue and patient, but the air inside the lobby felt cooler than the breeze outside. Not cold exactly, controlled, polished, as if warmth itself had to earn permission to exist here. He stood for a moment at the threshold, one hand on the handle of a worn suitcase that had seen better decades. The wheels clicked unevenly across the stone floor, a small, imperfect sound that echoed too loudly in the vastness. Chandeliers hung overhead like frozen constellations, their light a muted gold that reflected off marble and glass without ever fully settling. Jack adjusted the strap of his backpack. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, clean but faded, and jeans softened by years of use. Nothing about him announced urgency or entitlement. He had driven 3 hours straight, his shoulders stiff from the road, his thoughts fixed on one simple promise. A few quiet days by the water before his son arrived on Saturday. A security guard stood near the entrance. Jack nodded as he passed. The guard glanced up, then back down at his phone. No greeting. No acknowledgement. A bell cart waited nearby. The bellman leaned against it, scrolling, eyes flicking briefly toward Jack's suitcase. Before drifting away, Jack kept walking, the click-click of his wheels marking his progress like a metronome set to the wrong tempo. At the front desk, a young man in a navy suit typed steadily, eyes on his screen. Jack stopped, set his suitcase beside him, and waited. The lobby hummed with a restrained quiet, soft music, distant voices, the faint rush of air conditioning. Seconds passed. Then more. Jack cleared his throat, gently. "Hi," he said. "I have a reservation. Mercer." The receptionist glanced up for half a second. His gaze traveled shirt, shoes, suitcase before returning to the monitor. His fingers slowed. He clicked twice, frowned slightly, and finally spoke. "Check-in is at 3. Jack nodded. He expected that. "I understand. I've been on the road since early morning. Would it be possible to leave my bag and maybe get access to a restroom? I'm happy to wait otherwise." The receptionist's expression didn't change. "Policy is policy, sir." Jack absorbed the words without reacting. He rested his palm on the suitcase handle, feeling the familiar scuff beneath his fingers. Inside the bag, tucked between folded clothes, was a small leather notebook, its edges softened by use. He hadn't thought about it consciously, but the weight of it grounded him. Old habits surfaced quietly. Observe first, respond later. He noticed the camera above the desk, angled slightly too high. The line of sight missed the bell cart by a few inches. He noticed how the receptionist's shoulders tensed when voices rose, how the bellman straightened whenever someone in tailored clothes crossed the threshold. Then the automatic doors slid open. The sound of luggage wheels this time was smooth, confident. A man in a tailored jacket stepped inside, silver hair neatly combed, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The lobby changed in an instant. "Good afternoon, Mr. Beaumont," the bellman said. "Already moving. Welcome back." A warm towel appeared. A glass of citrus-colored juice followed. The receptionist's posture shifted. His smile found its way to his eyes. "Please have a seat, sir. We'll take care of everything." Jack stood there, invisible again, watching the choreography unfold. He didn't feel anger, not yet. What pressed against his chest was something quieter, heavier. Recognition. He turned slightly. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice level. "That gentleman arrived after I did." The receptionist hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "Mr. Beaumont is a VIP guest." "I see," Jack replied. He paused. "I paid in full. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be treated the same." The receptionist shifted in his chair. "I can call the manager." "Yes," Jack said. "Please do." He stepped back and waited. He didn't sit. He didn't check his phone. His eyes drifted once more to the camera, then to the doors, then to the desk. When the manager emerged from behind the frosted glass corridor, Her heels echoed with purpose. Miranda Kessler stopped a few feet away. Her gaze swept over Jack's shoes, shirt, suitcase, and settled on his face. It lasted barely a second. It was long enough. Miranda Kessler stood with her hands loosely clasped in front of her, shoulders straight, chin lifted just enough to signal authority. She wore a tailored blazer the color of slate, immaculate and sharp, like armor polished every morning. Her expression was composed, professional. Yet something beneath it flickered, a restrained impatience that suggested she had already decided how this conversation would end. "Yes?" she said, her eyes settling on Jack. Not unkind, not warm, neutral in the way that often concealed judgment. Jack met her gaze. He noticed the way the light overhead felt harsher now, reflecting off the marble in sharper lines. The lobby seemed louder too, though no one had raised their voice. A few guests lingered nearby, pretending not to listen while listening closely. "I was told I need to wait 2 hours to check in," Jack said. "Another guest arrived after me and was accommodated immediately. I asked why." Miranda nodded once, as if he were reciting a familiar script. "Silver Harbor operates under a 5-star service model. Certain guests have priority privileges based on loyalty and spending history." Jack let the words land. "So the difference is how much money someone appears to bring through the door." Miranda's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's not about appearance," she replied. "It's about standards, expectations. We have to ensure our top guests receive the level of service they're accustomed to." "And the rest?" Jack asked quietly. A ripple of whispers passed through the space. Someone near the seating area shifted in their chair. The bellman, suddenly very interested in aligning luggage tags, avoided looking up. Miranda inhaled, slow and measured. "Everyone receives good service here, but there are policies in place to protect the experience of the guests who sustain this resort. That's how businesses like this survive." Jack felt the familiar pull in his chest. The instinct to disengage, to let things go for the sake of peace. He thought of his son, of the questions children asked when adults failed to notice how closely they were watching. "I'm not asking to be prioritized," he said. "I'm asking not to be dismissed." Miranda studied him more carefully now. Up close, she could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the restraint in the way he stood. This wasn't a man demanding attention. This was a man insisting on dignity. "You have to understand," she said, lowering her voice. "Every day, I'm responsible for numbers you don't see. Occupancy rates, reviews, revenue targets. If we disappoint the wrong guest, it costs jobs." "Whose jobs?" Jack asked. The question hung between them. Miranda's lips parted, then closed again. For a moment, something tired surfaced in her eyes. An image of late nights, spreadsheets glowing in the dark, phone calls that never seemed to end. Before she could respond, a small interruption broke the tension. A woman approached, pushing a housekeeping cart. She was middle-aged, her movements careful, practiced. She placed a bottle of water gently on the edge of the front desk, within Jack's reach, and offered him a brief, apologetic smile. "Here you go, sir," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Thank you." Miranda's gaze snapped to the bottle, then to the woman. "Rosa," she said, curt. "That won't be necessary." Rosa hesitated, then stepped back without a word. Jack wrapped his fingers around the bottle, the coolness a quiet contrast to the heat creeping up his neck. The small gesture settled something inside him. Proof that kindness still existed here, even if it was being asked to keep quiet. "I don't doubt the pressure you're under," Jack said. "But policies don't excuse how people are treated. They explain procedures. They don't justify disrespect." Miranda's composure cracked, just slightly. "This is a luxury environment," she said. "We can't be everything to everyone." "No," Jack agreed. "But you can be fair." Her eyes flicked around the lobby. The audience had grown. She felt it, the weight of watching eyes, the risk of losing control of the narrative. Her voice sharpened. If you're unhappy, you're free to cancel your reservation, she said. Or wait like everyone else. The words landed harder than she intended. A few guests exchanged glances. The receptionist's hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. Jack took a breath. Slowly, deliberately. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. Miranda scoffed. "What is this now?" she said. "Are you calling to complain online?" Jack looked at her, calm and steady. "I'm calling because this matters." He tapped the screen. The line began to ring. The call connected on the third ring. Jack didn't say much. He didn't need to. His voice stayed low, even stripped of anything that could be mistaken for anger. He stated the facts as he had. Observed them, nothing more. When he ended the call, he slid the phone back into his pocket and stood still, as if waiting for the world to decide what it would do next. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Miranda Kessler watched him with an expression that hovered between disbelief and irritation. She expected raised voices, threats, perhaps embarrassment followed by retreat. Instead, Jack offered nothing. No challenge. No performance. The absence unsettled her more than confrontation ever could. "Is that supposed to impress me?" she asked lightly, though the effort showed. "We've handled complaints before." Jack didn't respond. He adjusted his grip on the suitcase handle, the familiar scuff grounding him. Then he turned toward the elevators. Behind him, the soft music continued to play. A guest laughed somewhere near the lounge. Life carried on, but something fundamental had shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the moment before a storm when the air grows heavy without warning. The elevator doors slid open, their mirrored surface briefly reflecting Jack's tired face. He stepped inside, the doors closing with a muted sigh that cut him off from the lobby. The quiet inside was immediate and complete. As the car ascended, Jack leaned back against the wall. He stared at the glowing numbers above the door, counting without meaning to. 3 floors. 4. 5. He thought of his son, of the drawing folded carefully in his suitcase. He wondered if he had gone too far or not far enough. Silence had always been his default. Today he had chosen something else. Downstairs, Miranda remained frozen where he had left her. She glanced at her watch, then at her phone. No notifications. No messages. She told herself she was overreacting. Guests complained all the time. They wrote emails. They left reviews. Things were smoothed over. That was her job. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling, crawling up her spine. Her phone lay in her palm, screen dark, suddenly heavier than it should have been. Across town, Paul Denton sat in traffic, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other holding his phone. The call he had just received had been brief and urgent. No names at first, just a location, a time, a request for immediate review. At the next red light, he pulled up the internal system and entered the name he'd been given. Mercer Jack. The file opened slowly, as if resisting him. Paul frowned. The summary was thin, almost deliberately so. No flags. No warnings. But then his eyes caught a small notation at the bottom of the screen, highlighted in pale yellow. Do not mishandle. He sat back, the weight of the words settling in. That tag wasn't used lightly. It wasn't about status or wealth. It was about risk of the reputational kind, of the systemic kind. Paul scrolled further. Employment history, maintenance, night shifts, long tenure, training certifications that had nothing to do with hospitality on the surface, yet somehow felt relevant. Audit workshops, compliance seminars. What were you doing at a resort? He muttered. The light turned green. Paul accelerated, mind racing ahead of the car. Back at Silver Harbor, the minutes stretched. One passed, then another. Miranda's phone vibrated against her palm. The sound cut through the lobby like a crack in glass. She looked down. The caller ID read, Executive Office. For a heartbeat, she considered not answering. The thought vanished as quickly as it came. Yes? she said, voice suddenly tight. No one nearby could hear the words on the other end, but they could see the effect. The color drained from her face. Her posture stiffened, then wavered. Yes, I understand, she whispered. She lowered the phone slowly, as if afraid it might burn her. Around her, staff members had gone still. The bellman stared at the floor. The receptionist's hands trembled above the keyboard. No one spoke. Upstairs, Jack stepped out of the elevator and walked down the corridor to his room. He unlocked the door, rolled his suitcase inside, and closed it gently behind him. The quiet wrapped around him like a blanket. He sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Across the city, Paul Denton pulled into the resort's circular drive. He didn't cut the engine right away. He stared at the entrance, the glass doors reflecting the afternoon sun. "Who are you, Jack Mercer?" he asked softly. The knock came just after sunset. Jack had been sitting by the window, watching the last of the light fade from the ocean. The room was quiet in a way the lobby had never been. No murmurs, no footsteps, only the distant rhythm of waves brushing against the shore. He stood, crossed the room, and opened the door. Paul Denton looked smaller than Jack had imagined him from the corporate headshots. His suit jacket was still immaculate, but the knot of his tie had loosened, as if the day had pulled at him more than he cared to admit. "Mr. Mercer," Paul said, "thank you for seeing me." Jack stepped aside and gestured him in. Paul entered carefully, taking in the room, the modest size, the single chair by the window, the suitcase resting unopened on the luggage rack. Nothing about it suggested leverage or power. That unsettled him. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," Paul said. He didn't sit yet. "What happened downstairs shouldn't have happened. Not here." Jack folded his arms loosely. "Apologies matter when they change something." Paul nodded. "That's why I'm here." He set his tablet on the desk and brought up a series of files. The screen glowed softly in the dim room, casting pale light across both their faces. "There's already an internal review underway," Paul continued. "Miranda's access has been revoked. Her termination followed protocol. No spectacle. No statements beyond what's required." Jack absorbed that without reaction. "I didn't come here to end anyone's career." "I know," Paul said, quietly, "but I should have acted sooner. That part is on me." He took a breath, then admitted what had been sitting heavy on his chest all evening. "We've had comments before. Reviews that mentioned feeling dismissed, overlooked. Nothing that crossed a line on paper, but enough to form a pattern if you look long enough. And you didn't," Jack said. Paul didn't argue. "I told myself it was noise, that the metrics were strong. Occupancy was high. Revenue was stable. I chose the comfort of numbers over the discomfort of accountability." Jack walked to the desk and picked up the tablet. He scrolled through a sampling of guest feedback, phrases that echoed each other without ever being loud enough to demand attention. "Great view, cold service. Beautiful place. Felt unwelcome. Wouldn't come back." "This isn't one person," Jack said. "It's a system that learned which voices mattered." Paul's jaw tightened. "And I let it." Jack set the tablet down. "Here's what needs to happen. Not for me. For everyone who walks through those doors next." Paul straightened, listening. "I want a full audit," Jack continued. "Not just complaints that made it to your desk. Everything. Surveys, comment cards, online reviews. I want to know who was ignored and how often." Paul nodded, already taking notes. "Second," Jack said, "training can't be theoretical. No slides. No slogans. Real scenarios. Real accountability. If someone fails to meet the standard, they don't stay in the role." Paul hesitated. "That will cost us." "Yes," Jack replied. "So does doing nothing." Silence settled between them, not tense but reflective. "There's one more thing," Jack added. "I don't want Miranda's name dragged through the industry. Handle her exit. Cleanly. Legally. She made a choice and she's paying for it. That's enough." Paul looked up, surprised. Most people would want more. Jack shook his head. I want change, not revenge. Paul let that sink in. He glanced toward the window, where the last traces of daylight had given way to a deepening blue. The warm lamp light behind him felt almost intrusive against the gravity of the moment. I spent years thinking my job was to keep things smooth, Paul said. But smooth can hide a lot. Jack met his eyes. It usually does. A soft knock interrupted them. Rosa stood in the doorway holding a neatly folded stack of towels. She paused when she saw Paul. I can come back, she said. No, Jack replied. You're fine. She stepped in, placed the towels on the chair, and offered Jack a gentle smile. Paul watched her go, something thoughtful crossing his face. She's been here a long time, Paul said. She sees things, Jack answered. Paul closed his tablet. There's one more development you should know about. Jack waited. Vivian Hart is coming in the morning, Paul said. She wants to see this herself. The name settled into the room with quiet weight. Jack nodded slowly. That's probably for the best. Paul stood, adjusting his jacket. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, he said. Thank you for forcing us to look. Jack didn't respond right away. He looked past Paul, toward the darkened ocean beyond the glass. Make it worth it, he said finally. Paul left. The door closed. Jack returned to the chair by the window and sat down. The sound of waves steady and patient below. Change, he knew, never arrived all at once. Came quietly, after someone decided not to look away. Vivian Hart arrived without an entourage. No black car idled at the curb. No advance announcement swept through the lobby. She walked in just after 9, wearing a light linen jacket and flats that had seen real sidewalks. The morning sun filtered through the glass facade, softer than the day before, casting a pale glow across the marble. The space looked the same yet felt altered, as if it were waiting to be asked a different set of questions. She paused near the entrance and took it in. The front desk, the bell cart, the camera angled too high above the counter. Good morning, she said to no one in particular. A few heads turned. A greeting followed, tentative, then more assured. Vivian nodded and moved on, her gaze steady, attentive. She wasn't here to inspect finishes or review numbers. She was here to listen. Paul Denton met her near the side corridor. He looked tired, but relieved. Thank you for coming, he said. I needed to, Vivian replied. Show me. They began with the footage. In a small conference room off the main hall, Vivian watched the previous afternoon unfold in grainy segments. Jack's arrival, the waiting, the moment the lobby changed its posture for a different kind of guest. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. When it ended, the room stayed quiet. That's not who we say we are, Vivian said finally. Paul swallowed. It's who we've become. She closed the laptop and stood. I want to meet him. Jack was by the water when she found him. The beach stretched wide and open, the tide gentle, the wind light. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring out at the horizon, as if listening for something beyond the sound of waves. Mr. Mercer, Vivian said, keeping her distance.
I'm Vivian Hart.
He turned. Recognition flickered, followed by caution. I know who you are. I imagine you do, she said. Thank you for agreeing to talk. They walked along the shoreline, side by side, their footsteps briefly marking the sand before the water erased them. Vivian asked him to tell the story again. Not the facts, but how it felt. Jack chose his words carefully. He spoke of silence, of being measured without consent, of deciding in a moment what lesson he wanted his son to inherit. Vivian listened without interrupting. I built this brand on the idea that service begins with respect, she said when he finished. Somewhere along the way, I let performance replace principle. Jack glanced at her. It happens quietly. She nodded. That's what scares me. Later, Vivian asked to meet the staff. Not managers, not department heads. The people who cleaned rooms, carried bags, answered phones. She stood with them in a service hallway, the hum of carts and radios filling the air, and invited them to speak. Rosa went first. "She wasn't always like that," Rosa said, choosing her words. "The pressure changed things, made us choose who to see." Vivian thanked her. Others followed, hesitant at first, then braver. Stories overlapped. Patterns emerged. By afternoon, Vivian felt the weight of it settle in her chest. She returned to the lobby alone and sat where guests often waited, watching the rhythm of arrivals. She noticed small changes already. An extra greeting, a door held open, a question asked without. Calculation, progress fragile and real. Jack joined her, holding a folded piece of paper. "My son sent this," he said. Vivian unfolded it carefully. The drawing was bright and imperfect. A beach, two figures holding hands, a sun that smiled too wide. "He's practicing," Jack said, "for when he gets here." Vivian smiled, something warm and unexpected spreading through her. "He sees the world, the way we forget to." As evening approached, Paul returned with news. "One of our corporate partners has concerns," he said quietly. "They're worried that changes to priority service will affect their experience. There's talk of pulling back." Vivian closed her eyes briefly. There it was, the choice she had postponed with policies and compromises, the line she had learned to blur. She looked out at the ocean, then back at Jack. "If I do this," she said, "it will cost us. Maybe not today, but soon." Jack met her gaze. "Then it matters." Vivian exhaled, the decision settling into place. "I won't build success on exclusion," she said. "Not anymore." The sun dipped lower, bathing the beach in amber light. The wind carried the promise of change. Quiet, steady, irreversible. Vivian stood. "Tomorrow we begin again." Jack watched her go, the drawing still in his hand, and felt something loosen inside him. Not hope exactly, something steadier. Trust. Liam arrived just before noon, his small backpack bouncing against his shoulders as he stepped through the glass doors of Silver Harbor Resort. He stopped short, eyes widening, not with awe, but with curiosity. The lobby felt different from the pictures his father had described over the phone. Brighter, warmer. The light seemed to travel farther now, settling instead of glancing away. "Dad," he whispered, tugging at Jack's hand. "It smells like the ocean in here." Jack smiled, a quiet curve at the corner of his mouth. "That's because they finally opened the windows." Liam took another step, scanning the room with the serious focus only children possessed. He noticed the bellman first, how he smiled before being asked, how he crouched slightly to say hello at eye level. A young couple entered behind them, dressed simply, and were greeted with the same warmth. Liam watched it all. He didn't say anything yet. Vivian stood near the front desk, speaking softly with Paul. When she saw Jack and Liam, she paused. Something in her posture softened, as if the space between who she was and who she hoped to be had narrowed. "You must be Liam," she said, kneeling slightly. "I've heard a lot about your drawings." Liam blinked, then nodded. "I draw things I want to remember. That's a good way to live," Vivian said. As they talked, a ripple of tension crossed the lobby. A group of returning guests, confident, polished, approached the desk with an expectation that preceded their words. The old reflex stirred. Jack felt it. So did Paul. "We'll need our usual arrangement," one of them said. "Expedited check-in." Vivian didn't rush to answer. She glanced around instead, at the staff, at Jack, at Liam, who was watching closely now. "We no longer separate guests by perceived value," Vivian said evenly. "Everyone is welcomed in the order they arrive." The silence that followed was sharp. "That's not what we agreed to," the guest replied. "It is what we stand for," Vivian said. The guest scoffed and turned away, already pulling out a phone. Paul shifted, instinctively calculating consequences. Vivian stayed still. Liam broke the tension. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. edges softened by travel. He walked over to the receptionist, Ethan, who looked startled to see him. "This is for you," Liam said, holding it out. Ethan hesitated, then accepted it. He unfolded the drawing. A lobby filled with light, people smiling, a small figure holding a door open. Above it, in uneven letters, were the words, "Everyone gets a hello." Ethan's throat tightened. "Thank you," he said quietly. Liam nodded, satisfied. "My dad says people forget sometimes." A laugh drifted through the lobby, not mocking, but relieved. A child's laugh, light and unguarded. It seemed to loosen something in the room. Conversations resumed. A guest complimented the artwork on the wall. Rosa passed by, eyes shining, and gave Liam a gentle thumbs up. Vivian watched it all, her chest aching with a mix of pride and resolve. This was the moment she had been avoiding, the proof that leadership wasn't about smoothing edges, but about holding the line when it mattered. She turned to Jack. "May I walk with you?" They stepped aside, near the windows where the light pooled warmly on the floor. Outside, waves rolled in with patient rhythm. "I know this isn't easy," Vivian said. "What I'm about to formalize will upset people. It will cost us partnerships. It may even cost me my position." Jack looked at Liam, now happily examining a decorative compass on a nearby table. "My son is watching," he said simply. Vivian nodded. "So is everyone else." She straightened and addressed the staff. Her voice carried, not loud, but clear. "Effective immediately," she said. "We will operate under one standard: courtesy without condition, service without judgment. If that's not something you can stand behind, this won't be the right place for you." No one spoke. Then, one by one, heads nodded. The guests who remained watched with new eyes. Later, as the afternoon mellowed into gold, Vivian found Jack again by the entrance. Liam sat nearby, coloring another page, humming softly. Vivian took a breath. "I need to ask you something." Jack met her gaze. "If I choose values over volume," she said, "will you stand with me when the pressure comes?" Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at his son, then back at her. "Are you asking me?" he said. "Or are you asking the future you want to build?" Vivian held his eyes, the question hanging between them like a bridge not yet crossed. Epilogue. The new sign went up quietly. No announcement. No press release. Just a simple plaque mounted behind the front desk, framed in warm oak. "Everyone gets a hello." Some guests didn't notice it at all. Others paused, read it twice, and smiled without knowing why. Silver Harbor Resort didn't change overnight. Change never worked that way, but the atmosphere shifted subtly, steadily, like a tide that no longer pulled people apart but carried them in together. Rosa noticed it first. She noticed how guests were greeted before they spoke, how eye contact lingered, how no one was left standing too long with a suitcase by their side. She noticed Ethan take an extra moment to explain things instead of reciting rules. She noticed how staff meetings felt less like performance reviews and more like conversations. Paul noticed it too. He stayed longer than he planned, overseeing the audit not as a formality but as a reckoning. Some staff left. Others stayed and learned. Paul faced uncomfortable truths about his own choices, how often he had equated smooth operations with good leadership. Took time, but responsibility, once accepted, had a way of clarifying everything else. Miranda's absence was felt, but not spoken of with bitterness. Vivian had kept her word. No public blame. No quiete rasure. Just a line drawn, firm and final. Vivian herself changed in ways no quarterly report could capture. She walked the property every morning, not to inspect but to observe. She asked names. She listened. She made decisions that didn't always make immediate sense on a spreadsheet but felt right in her bones. Some partners pulled back. Others leaned in. The balance shifted. And still the resort held. On Saturday afternoon, Jack and Liam were down by the beach. The sand was cool where the tide had just retreated, warm where the sun still lingered. Liam knelt with intense focus, shaping towers and walls, his small hands moving with purpose. "It has to be strong," he said, "so it doesn't fall when the water comes." Jack watched, seated nearby, shoes off, sleeves rolled. "Strong things aren't always hard," he said. "Sometimes they're flexible." Liam considered this, then added a small channel around the castle. "So it can breathe," he decided. Vivian approached slowly, barefoot, carrying 3 paper cups of lemonade. She stopped a few steps away, giving them space. "It looks like a real place," she said. Liam beamed. "It's for everyone." Jack smiled, something warm and settled in his chest. Later, as the sun lowered and painted the sky in gold and amber, they walked back toward the resort together. Children laughed nearby. Waves whispered against the shore. The lobby lights glowed softly through the glass. No longer cold, no longer distant. Inside, the sign caught the fading light. "Everyone gets a hello." Vivian stood beside Jack, watching Liam wave enthusiastically at a staff member who waved back just as eagerly. "I've been thinking," Vivian said, "about what leadership actually looks like." Jack waited. "It looks like choosing the harder." "Good," she continued. "Again and again." Jack nodded. "And letting others see you do it." She turned to him then, the weight of the past weeks settling into something steady. "I don't know exactly where this leads," she said, "but I know how I want to walk there." Jack met her gaze. "Not alone." The words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. They stood there as the light dimmed, the world quieter now, fuller. Epilogue. 6 months later, Silver Harbor became a case study. Not for revenue growth, though it held. Not for branding, though that evolved too. But for something less measurable and more lasting. Guest retention increased among people who had never felt welcome anywhere like this before. Staff turnover dropped. Reviews changed tone. Words like seen, warm, human appeared again and again. Other resorts asked questions. Vivian answered carefully. Jack never took a title. He didn't need one. He spent his mornings with Liam, his afternoons consulting. When asked, his evenings walking the shoreline with someone who understood that love, like leadership, was built on presence. One afternoon, Liam taped a new drawing next to the plaque. It showed 3 figures holding hands beneath a wide sky. Underneath, in careful letters, he wrote, "This is how places remember people." No one took it down. The ocean kept rolling in. The doors kept opening. And inside Silver Harbor Resort, the promise held. Quietly, consistently, and for everyone who walked through.